Welcome to Washington in Focus, your source for the week's top stories in the state of Washington. I'm Cole Lauterbach, managing editor for the Center Square Newswire service. This week, we'll be discussing Washington state officials saying the quiet part out loud about goals to ban residential gas. One county starting a community court that will handle more serious crimes than others like it. And blazing ballot boxes in Southwest Washington. That's ahead on Washington in Focus. I'm Cole Lauterbach.
Knowledge is power, and you deserve to know what happens in your state government. That's why the nonprofit Franklin News Foundation is bringing you straight news journalism through the Center Square, reporting on state authorities and publishing stories that show where your money goes and who spends it. By supporting the Center Square, you can track politicians' use of taxpayer money and demand transparency from elected officials. This is how we can equip everyday Americans to hold their government accountable. Become a supporter of Franklin today at franklinnews.org/donate.
Welcome back to Washington in Focus. I'm Cole Lauterbach. Now, let's jump into the headlines. Washington officials and others opposing a ballot initiative that would ban any attempts to ban natural gas use in the state have long held that there's no plan to phase out residential use of natural gas. Supporters of the initiative have long disagreed. Initiative investigative reporter TJ Martinell seems to have come across testimony that would indicate that not only do state officials plan to phase out liquid natural gas, but they have to. What meeting did you play fly on the wall for, TJ?
So it was for a meeting for the Washington Climate Partnership, and it's just a group of different government agencies throughout the state, including the Department of Commerce and the Department of Ecology.
And so this is a quiet room full of wonky people talking about definitions and terms and acronyms that the normal layperson likely won't understand. But what was said then about the state's residents needing to be weaned off of natural gas?
So what happened is they were discussing the Department of Commerce's Priority Climate Action Plan. It's a federal concept, and the plan was funded by the federal government as to create a comprehensive plan to get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And they haven't fully developed the plan and the different measures for reducing carbon emissions. But one of the questions that came up during the meeting was what would be the impact of the initiatives, specifically the cap and trade initiative and the initiative that would ban natural gas. And a ecology official said that it would impact some of the measures that they had looked at in terms of being able to implement them. So when I reached out to Ecology for comment, interestingly enough, they spoke of the Climate Commitment Act, which would be repealed through Initiative 2117. They didn't really mention anything about natural gas or the initiative that would make it illegal to ban it.
Now, but in the meeting, they have said, essentially that, okay, we're going to have to essentially move away from a lot of what Washingtonians rely on in terms of natural gas and, other things in favor of electrification. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, it's, I think the issue is that it's the inevitable conclusion. If you're going to have net zero emissions by 2050, you can't have natural gas. So anyone who's saying that they weren't going to ban natural gas at some point, it's impossible to come to those two conclusions, saying we're not going to ban natural gas, but we got to have zero carbon emissions by 2050. And so that's where it gets really interesting, where nobody's really saying the quiet part out loud, at least too loudly. They're kind of coming at it from a side wind.
Yeah, they're hinting at it. No, but wait a minute. These are the people that are supporters of these programs, are the ones that are, responsible for them. They're not the opposition who has been claiming this. The initiative supporters to put in, to repeal the CCA, to pass a ban on any utilities saying you can't have natural gas in your new construction home. This is what they have said is the plan all along, right?
This is what it's interesting that government officials aren't directly saying it, but they're engaging in behavior that inevitably leads to it. And so that's what the Building Industry Association of Washington, when I reached out to them for comment, they said, yeah, these statements said during this meeting just are a tacit acknowledgement that this was the plan all along, which is why there's opposition to this initiative by certain groups of people. Because if you make a ban on natural gas illegal, then it's pretty much going to be impossible to meet the state's net zero emission goals by 2050.
Right. So, I mean, and this is in the climate goals are Governor Inslee's crowning achievement. I mean, really that and the CCA and all of these green initiatives. So I think what it also does is underscores how much these initiatives put all of these achievements and goals up in the air, right?
Well, yeah, it's basically going to it's going to undo a lot of what he's been trying to do over the last, 3 terms, as far as what he's, trying to move towards, solar and wind, but also move away from fossil fuels and natural gas. So this isn't to say that people will continue to use natural gas at the levels that they do now in the future. It's just, it's going to deprive the state of ability to force people to do stuff. Kind of like it's akin to the gasoline vehicle sales ban by 2030, where it will be illegal to register a new car of 2030 or later in the state that's powered by fossil fuels. That's something that's not being driven by consumers. It's being driven by the state in order to achieve certain environmental goals. So this isn't to say that people will stop. That's aside from whether or not people are actually going to drive electric vehicles. The states induced creating artificial demand. And so even if this initiative passes, that doesn't mean people will continue to use natural gas at the levels that they do. But it means that the state can't force demand for electricity as a replacement.
Right. I mean, and behind this all, these initiatives, in theory, people will approve of them, but it seems like it's a communication thing where when they realize that once the rubber hits the road on these, they're pretty unpopular because they mean, like you said, it's a market manipulation where people will have to change the very, facets of how they live their lives in terms of, natural gas, electric vehicles. Once people see how, the kitchen table aspect of it, that remains fairly unpopular, hence the need to force the behavior and not just entice people to do it via things like incentives.
Right. And I think the implications people are thinking about, the ban on natural gas, what that means in practicality is that thousands of homes in Washington state will have to have their heating and cooking appliances replaced with electricity, which is going to cost a lot of money. And so they're going to have to, and it's going to put additional burden on the electrical grid. So for a lot of people, this also means that if you have a natural, and they might make a grandfather clause where, you don't have to replace it if you stay in the house, but you will have to replace it if you're going to sell it or if somebody wants to buy it. So that has implications for the real estate market and for house values, because if your house is powered by electricity in every way right now, its value is not threatened by a natural gas ban.
Right. But if it is powered by natural gas and you're going to change ownership of it, if there is, like a grandfather clause, like you're saying, that represents an additional cost that the seller will have to incur before they can actually change the titles on the house, which is why BIAW has been against this, for some time, because they've seen the writing on the wall with this, where this is going to be a manipulation that's going to have a ripple effect that goes far beyond just, municipal and new homes being just a little bit more expensive.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, TJ. Appreciate it. Community courts are seen as a way to keep people outside of jail cells when that they need might be treatment for mental health issues or some other problem that incarceration can't fix. In theory, it sounds like a good way to get people back on the right track. Now, Thurston County announced that they'd start a program to do just that with aims for homeless. But when Seattle reporter Spencer Pauly looked into the new program, he found that it differed in a way that had to be followed up on. First, Spencer, describe the program and its goals.
Sure. So Thurston County's upcoming court alternative program seeks to help homeless people resolve misdemeanor offenses while working to address the underlying causes of homelessness and committing crime. It gives offenders a sort of credit for time served in the program, and then they will be sent to participating service providers programs that specifically meet their needs, all the while reconciling legal involvement.
And the first thing when I read your story, the first question I had was, what type of lawless behavior are we going to be referring to this, new pilot court system?
And that's the big question, Cole. Any homeless offender is eligible if they have a misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, simple possession charge, or outstanding warrant. It's a broad spectrum there. Basically anything that's non-felony. That also includes domestic violence and sex-related misdemeanors, which I found out when watching the presentation on this program.
And you had what got your attention that you noted in the story was that when they were describing what type of offenses could be referred to this court, they included those terms. They were open about it. Said sex offenses and domestic violence, but the I believe it was a woman who said it. She was very quick to kind of hands off on that. Yeah.
So Thurston County's Criminal Justice Regional Program Manager, Leah Landon's the one who gave this presentation. Now, when she was talking about who's all included and is allowed to be eligible for this program, she said, including those who commit domestic violence or sex-related crimes, immediately says this was included at the request of the prosecutor's office and public defenders. So basically kind of shifting blame as to why this is all included. Now, I reached out to Landon about this and the county because it's interesting that they include this when the model that they're going off of does not. They exclude sex offenders and domestic violence offenders. Now, I asked her, I was like, why is this how did this come to be? Why did the prosecutor's office come to this decision? And Landon noted that, the case, it's very unlikely that these offenders will be considered unless a deputy prosecutor decides to refer them. And then also the public defender does. So that's going to take a lot of steps for someone to get there. But I think the point still stands that the fact that they're eligible raises some eyebrows.
Yeah, the fact that it could happen at all becomes suddenly a real thing when you are a victim of, say, maybe a sex offense or domestic violence. And, those victims don't, what you want to do, what you want to see when you're a victim of a crime of that magnitude, if it's not a felony even, you want to see protection. You want to see incarceration. You want to see that person no longer be in a situation where they can be where you're accessible to them.
Right.
And
right.
That's what really I think becomes the heart of this. Even prosecutors having the potential option, I think, becomes problematic.
Yeah, I think what the county would counter with that is that they're looking more at rehabilitation of these people that are suffering from homelessness and are committing crimes. Now, Landon emphasized that this isn't a diversion program, quote unquote, but rather is a referral process to potentially link these offenders to programs. I think the point still stands, though, is that you want to seek justice if you are a victim of these crimes, particularly domestic violence and sex-related misdemeanors. These
exactly.
are serious.
Right. And with domestic violence, just to get an idea of just how serious it is, you look at domestic violence laws across the country. They're typically state-based. If you're convicted of a domestic violence related crime, oftentimes you lose your Second Amendment rights. You can't own a gun anymore. Mm-hmm. To just give an idea of the background behind some of this. And that's, these are elsewhere, too. This is not just Thurston County dreaming up something like this. San Diego also is kind of the brainchild of this idea, right?
Yeah, Thurston County would say that their court diversion program or court alternative program is a hybrid of San Diego's homeless courts program. And what San Diego has there is sort of the same type of program that provides these kinds of alternative service providing options for homeless people, but as all the while trying to solve this misdemeanor cases, absolve them of crimes. Now, the one particular difference between them is that San Diego excludes domestic violence and sex crimes. But when I reached out to the San Diego Homeless Courts Program, they said basically California has different legal requirements for certain cases, and that differences between California and Washington State. But they said they are in support of Thurston County making whatever rules they want for their programs, as long as it helps these people.
Yeah, you've heard stories in Washington about judicial discretion. Seattle, especially, with the one judge there having, the prosecutors essentially rebel, saying that, you can't handle serious crimes because we don't trust your discretion to let people off, that you're, these are serious offenders, serious crimes, and you're providing, extrajudicial discretion on this. And now you're giving similar discretion to prosecutors and public defenders, right, who are not, prosecutors might be, depending on the level, but they're not publicly elected officials. They answer to somebody who's publicly elected. And, the public defenders, that's a whole different story. So it adds another angle in there that I can't see a victim looking at, a victim of one of these crimes looking at and saying, I think justice has been served based on what was done to me. So we'll definitely follow this one. Great story, Spencer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Election day, if you haven't heard, is next Tuesday, and people are getting crazy. In Southwest Washington and neighboring Portland, Oregon, someone is taking advantage of the unprotected nature of ballot drop boxes and setting people's civic right to vote ablaze. Capitol correspondent Carlene Johnson covered this act of political terrorism. Where did the arsons take place, Carlene?
Yeah, we had a couple of locations. One was in Portland, Oregon, the other in Vancouver, Washington, at the Fisher's Landing Transit Center, ironically just a couple of blocks away from where my son lives. And it was about the same time, both of them, 3 a.m., 4 a.m.-ish on Monday morning. And the one in Portland didn't do a heck of a lot of damage. It only burned up 3 ballots before the fire suppression inside the drop box worked. Unlike the one in Vancouver, Cole, which didn't work as planned. That one did a heck of a lot of damage.
Right. Well, have they answered to that yet as to why didn't I thought it was state statute that you had to have some sort of fire suppression system in these unsupervised drop boxes. And right. Instead, we saw video of this from, local eyewitnesses. They're raking out charred remains of ballots.
Yeah. Right. It was bad. It did not work. And the gal at Clark County Elections told me via email, we don't know. We'll be looking into that. We have no clue why it didn't work, but it definitely didn't work, because it burned up something like 488 ballots in all were damaged, according to a Wednesday night press release from Clark County Elections and Vancouver PD. So they're in the process of contacting those voters. Or the voters have contacted the office going, hey, wait a minute, I stuck my ballot in that drop box over the weekend. I think mine might have burned up in there. So they're in the process of trying to, make sure everybody can fill out a new ballot. Or in some cases, maybe just the edge of the envelope was charred, right? And they could see whose it was, and maybe the whole ballot itself, the integrity of the ballot wasn't impacted. But
yeah. So the ballot's just medium rare. It's not really overly cooked
like that. Yeah,
absolutely. It's my favorite that's my favorite way to cook a ballot. Now, Carlene, did they catch this Yahoo yet?
Yeah. So it was not until Wednesday night that we got an update from Portland police. They held a late day news conference and released a description of this guy. And they think it's the same guy, by the way, in the Portland arson and the Vancouver arson. And they think he's also the same guy responsible for an attempted ballot box arson back on October the 8th that really didn't come out until this other stuff did. It might have made, small local media. It was some sort of incendiary device next to a box. So it didn't make big national news like this thing did. But they say this guy is white, 30 to 40 years old. They say very short hair or balding. A thin to medium build, thin face.
Aren't we all? But okay.
I was going to say that looks like most of y'all, doesn't it? And highly knowledgeable, they say, in both metal fabrication and welding, which I thought was interesting. Man. So it sounds like, it sounds like this incendiary device, whatever it was a homemade kind of a thing, not a bomb, not a pipe bomb, right? That's kind of when you hear incendiary device, my brain goes to like pipe bomb, unibomb type stuff. But it wasn't that. It was some sort of just a device that was meant to heat up so rapidly, then it would begin, start that fire. And it worked, very successfully in the Vancouver case. So the other description that we already had prior to last night, Cole, was the vehicle. They say it's between a 2001 and 2004 Volvo S60, like more matte in color, not like the shiny finish. They think it's probably tan or maybe light gray. And the back plate on it was not visible. So I don't know if it was one of those ones that has the cover over it that is.
I typically obscure my play before I go do crimes too. But I mean, again, I think that's, I'm glad that they got the suspect, and it sounds like that he's, in terms of the likelihood that he is responsible for all of the crimes, including the crime of going bald. But the one question, and I hate asking it, but have they devised any, political, thoughts on it, or is this just the type of guy that wants to see the world burn?
Well, that's a good question. The New York Times was sourced over the week or midweek saying that they had spoken to law enforcement officials, nobody named, perhaps off the record, that some of these incendiary devices, whether it's the one back on October the 8th or the two this week, said "Free Gaza" on them. So you certainly could be like a pro-Palestine organization. Others have suggested Antifa. Of course, Portland's notorious internationally for during all the, BLM riots and all that, for Antifa and the destruction of the city. And they have made no secret leading up to the election, Cole, that, not only do they intend to be disruptive, but now there's these massive protests that are planned election day in Portland. Police held a big presser on that. So I think they're going to find the guy. I think there's enough description on this, and, perhaps somebody talks to somebody who talks, and, and they track this guy down because, things like this, people might go, oh, it's an inanimate object, ballots can be replaced, yada, yada. We know people like this are bent on things that escalate to things that are far more dangerous. Exactly.
And that was going to be my next thought, is this is a psychological move in terms of their motivations behind this and the thoughts. And I don't care, whose side they're on, or whatever it is. It to me smacks of political terrorism. I'm against one side or the other.
Absolutely. I want to add one more quick thing. I know we're short on time, but for people that are, concerned about their ballots and dropping them in a drop box, I get that. I met a woman yesterday at a Federal Way drop box, and she's like, is it okay to put it in here? It's in front of City Hall. Is this good? And I'm like, I think you're safe. It's good. First time voting, by the way, from Ukraine. She and her husband have been here for many years, but finally became citizens. This is their first election. She was so excited.
Oh, wow.
That's just an aside, but votewa.gov. If you go to votewa.gov, you can see where your ballot is. Most cases right now, it'll just show accepted, right? Or if there's a signature challenge or something, it'll show that. So go there if you're all concerned about the integrity of your ballot, want to make sure it's at your auditor's office. Go to vote.gov. You put in your name, your birth date. It takes you right to your ballot, and you can see exactly where it's sitting. You can also find out when it's been tabulated and, counted come election night.
Thank you, Carlene, and a big thank you to all of our journalists for sharing their stories today. Stay up to date with these and more at thecentersquare.com. I'm Cole Lauterbach, and until next time, this has been Washington in Focus.